Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook on this Friday, May 16th. Yeah, my eyes are still good enough, or maybe I should make it bigger next time. But we're the 16th. Yeah. All right. I am Marc-Antoine Godin with Arpin Basu. Arpin, I had my sources telling me in the wild world of sports that a colleague of mine shot below 100 for the first time in his life.
I still have. I just came from the golf course. Yes, I broke 100 for the first time in my life.
Way to go!
Good start to the season. It's only my second day out, so I'm encouraged. My goal in golf is to be not terrible. And today I was not terrible. I was just bad. And like that's really my goal, is just to be bad. Like don't be absolutely god awful at golf.
Yeah.
Just be like bad and verging on okay. You know, like I think it's a reasonable goal to set. It's kind of like the Canadiens and their meaningful games, you know, like I feel like this is my goal in golf, is to not be terrible, just be bad. And today I was like kind of bad, and that's great. I shot a 98 and I couldn't have been happier. I walked off the course and I was like, wow, this is a great day. So you're getting a fully energized Arpin for this podcast because I broke 100 for the first time.
I'm so happy you were bad.
Yes.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. I guess there must be like some sort of a social payoff behind it, because I'm so not a golf person that I can only think of playing golf because of the social networking aspect of it. So I guess in order to do that, you have to be just good enough that you don't literally slow down the group and create some empathy.
Well, that's the thing about golf, is that if you're terrible, you kind of piss off the good golfers.
That's
it.
So
so that's why I want to be not terrible, and I think I'm getting there. Quite proud. But we have other things to talk about other than my golf game.
Yes.
Which, you know, I'm sure the Canadiens players are getting their golf games tuned up, and Martin St. Louis is probably getting his golf game tuned up. But yeah, we each wrote a little kind of off-season-y piece, I guess, recently, and there's, I don't know. The more I think about the Canadiens off-season, and that's what we want to talk to you about today, is the less critical it becomes in my eyes. I don't know if you agree, and I got this impression at the end of the season. I think I wrote my Game 5 piece was somewhat based on this. Was like but the things that we talk about needing for the Canadiens. We did a whole episode on their 2C and what they can do and all the different possibilities, half an hour on Sidney Crosby, all that stuff. Like the Canadiens are definitely going to pursue those things. But they're not at a critical stage where they need to do something. They need to strike big. And I know that fans will probably feel, well, they didn't really strike big last year. You know, the Laine trade was interesting and it was a good gamble and whatever. It didn't quite work out, although I think, you know, he scored 20 goals. Like it's not like he was absolutely awful all season. But I guess there's this appetite probably to move this along, get it going. And I just sense more of an appetite from Gorton and Hughes to do it correctly and not do something you might regret this offseason just because you feel like, oh, we made the playoffs, we have to make the playoffs next year or else it'll be a big failure. I'm not sure they see it that way. So that's why I kind of felt like this might be, if they can't get that 2C, they're not going to reach for it, and they could just kind of make some minor additions here and there, penalty killers to kind of replace the potential departure of Dvorak and Armia, a right shot D, third pairing types, have 6-7 defensemen, stuff like that. And I think the Canadiens would be fine because I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Well, those last two aspects, I guess we're going to tackle those issues later on in on the pod. But yeah, generally speaking, I do agree. Moves that they might regret. I think that that is first and foremost free agency moves. I don't necessarily see. I mean, although it's a possibility and that's something that's at their disposal, I don't see it at all as the preferred way to go for this year, at least. Probably going later on for something more surgical. But when you're looking at something that is a bigger component of your roster, I would see it more like going through a trade than a free agent signing. There is a sense, I mean, I get a feeling that they want to let things grow a little bit by themselves. The organic growth that we've been hearing about the last couple of years. I don't think they've gone away from this. The point, though, is that when you add, let's say, a second line centerman, it's not just what that centerman is going to do to make your team better. It's also that having a competent, reliable, effective player in that slot helps other players that are younger that you need to assist in order for them to grow. Ivan Demidov, if you can find him like a legitimate centerman who knows what he does, who's good at it, who can guide him, that'd be great. So it would be good for his development. It would be good for Nick Suzuki, who could finally have the support that he's been lacking. And under those circumstances, what he's been able to accomplish this year, it's phenomenal. So having this cushion behind him, it would help him. It actually would help his whole line. It would help Demidov. It would help a variety of other aspects where you want a young team to grow and get better naturally. But at the same time, it's good to have, it's always that image of the flower that you can't pull on in order for it to grow faster. But you need tutors. You need tutors to a certain extent for it to grow straight. And I think that adding a second line center, if you pick that player well, could help within those different departments. So that's why I think that, no, they probably won't go out of their way in order to make that acquisition, but they must acknowledge the fact that it's a need for this team.
No, and they do 100% acknowledge that it's a need for this team, and they will go out of their way. I believe they will be very aggressive on the trade front. I mean, it's their two first round picks, whether they're both of them or whether it's one of them, they're definitely on the table. They're in play, and the thing that's interesting about this offseason for the Canadiens that wasn't necessarily the case last offseason is that there are clear teams that they can do business with. Like, there are clear teams that are suddenly in a position where they know they're declining and they know they have to do something. And last year, I think you mentioned them on Monday's episode, but keep going. But no, but it's just the environment. Like last year, I truly believe that the Canadiens couldn't find teams that had players that interested them and also were in a phase where they needed to add futures, where they needed what the Canadiens were selling. Most of the teams that had players that interested the Canadiens considered themselves to be competitive teams. And that's the key part, right? Like when we mentioned like Boston, the Islanders, and Pittsburgh on the Monday episode as three teams the Canadiens can do business with, that's totally true. But like another team could be Vancouver, or maybe even should be Vancouver, but does Vancouver really think that they're in that group? Doesn't sound like it. Like, it doesn't seem like they acknowledge that they're on the precipice of something, of being perpetually in the mushy middle. Like, I mean, they seem like they're in a place where they might never be able to get out of this constant, we get in some years, we don't other years, where it's if you can't get the Pettersson thing figured out, then that's a problem, and so, but I didn't put them in, and I had a piece that ran this morning and they weren't in there because the team has to realize it, right? And like, I included Boston, but it's not clear what Boston thinks, like do they really think that they want a full rebuild, or are they going to like just tweak and retool a little bit? And like, they went pretty hard at the deadline, actually had a tremendous deadline for them. Like they brought in a lot of assets, futures, and really aggressively sold some players. And I think they really did that well, and wound up with the 7th pick of the draft. Would have been 5th where the lottery fell differently for them. are they still in a mode where where they want more picks? You know, when you're picking seventh, does picking seventh and 16th interest Boston? And if so, does Pavel Zacha shake free, for instance? Like, it's just as an example. Like, but if they if they feel that they're close to being competitive, maybe they keep Zacha. I don't know, but like, he's got 2 years left on his contract. It's a very good number for a guy who plays the role that he does. Like, it's 4.75 a year for 2 years. Like, it just seems like, but that's in terms of an environment, like the fact that Boston is having that conversation, and I don't know for a fact that they are, but the fact that they might be, is fertile ground for the Canadiens. The fact whoever comes in to run the Islanders, that's fertile ground for the Canadiens. Pittsburgh is definitely fertile ground for the Canadiens. And these types of teams basically didn't exist. You had a whole bunch of rebuilding teams, and you had a whole bunch of teams who thought they were going to make the playoffs, and there was nothing in between. And so now this year, there seems to be like an in-between layer of teams that were formerly playoff teams that realize that they need a refresh, and the Canadiens are there to provide what they require. And that's an interesting environment for them, because I think it's safe to say that the Laine trade was a bit of a last resort kind of move. Like, they had exhausted all sorts of other possibilities on the trade market and saw that they weren't getting anywhere. And then the Laine opportunity popped up. And so they're like, okay, let's take a swing on this. Let's see. And, is it the first thing they would have done? Probably not. And if they didn't get the second round pick, would they have done it? Probably not. But they did. And it was worth a shot, and we both endorsed it. But I think there's more tangible trade discussions that this team can have with clearly identifiable teams, like a clearly identifiable type of team that has now emerged that wasn't necessarily there before.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned Boston. We can think of the Pittsburgh Penguins, the New York Islanders too. Those are clearly teams that
like Vancouver and like the Rangers. Like, what are the Rangers? Which direction are the Rangers going? Like, what do we like?
I think that sometimes you have to look also in the other moves and understand what they might mean. Outside of a vacuum, like you just talked about about Boston. To me, them trading Marchand instead of keeping him sends the signal that, we're turning the page. It's going to be the beginning of a new era with Marchand. If they had intention
for what they traded him for, they didn't really get anything for him. Like, it wasn't as if they got this huge haul of stuff.
They're about to get a first round pick for him.
Yeah.
So because they're going to get to to the conference final, the rule,
was that the condition?
The condition, something like that.
I forget what the condition was.
But whatever the return, to me, it's like he's been their leader. He was their captain. If they had any intention of being aggressively buyers in order to be like in a playoff spot next season, you keep your captain, you keep your the heart of your team, and you find a way to get something done. By not doing it,
that was also indicative of how their negotiations were going, right? Like, he's a free agent, so they didn't want to sign him at the number that he wanted to sign for. So that's definitely
maybe it's just that, but I don't know. To me, there's the wind blows in a certain direction, and same for the Rangers when they hire Mike Sullivan as a head coach.
Yeah,
they have every intention on being competitive next season and not necessarily change their roster thinking of the medium term or long term. It's probably a short term sort of fix that they might want to do,
Yeah, exactly. And they're not trading core pieces for futures. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it would be, yes. So if the Panthers make it to the conference final, and Marchand appears in 50% of their games, which he has, it would be a 2027 first round pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I don't know, maybe by 2027, the Panthers won't be that good. It's possible. I doubt it, but it's possible. And in any case, and if they don't make it to the third round, which seems kind of inevitable now, but it's possible, they might lose game 6. That would be a second round pick in 2027.
Yeah. So we went in depth on Monday about those second line center options, but you mentioned two other needs that the Canadiens might have. So let's stick at the center position, because you say that what Christian Dvorak brought to the Canadiens will need to be replaced, and you seem to think, if I understand this right, and I read your article, and you mentioned Radek Faksa as a possibility, that that acquiring a player from the outside to fill that role is the way to go. So why is that?
Well, because it's rare. It's rare for a player to walk into the role that Dvorak filled, be like a defensive zone start guy, a face-off guy, a penalty kill guy. Like, these are kind of veteran roles. Now, I am of the mind, and I think Marty was asked about this over the course of the season. I think he could see it happening too. But you have guys who can transition into penalty killing roles. I think Alex Newhook is one. I think Heineman is one. But neither of them know how to win a face-off, right? Newhook's better than Heineman at it, presumably, but not much. So it's like, that's a key part of being a penalty killer, right? Is especially if you're playing in the center position. It's a situation. It's a game state where the face-off has added value, right? Having a guy who can consistently win the draws on the penalty kill helps your penalty kill. And so the Canadiens had the luxury of having a really strong left shot face-off guy, a really strong right shot face-off guy, and a backup strong right shot face-off guy. They're not going to have that. And so this is a detail, and this is where I think the Canadiens build is at. Like, these are the little details that they need to address from the management side. Like, they need to make sure that these little important roles get filled competently. The 2C hole is obvious because, Jake Evans is sent to play with Caulfield and Slavkovsky in the final period of the season. Like, that should never happen, right? But without Dvorak, and the thing about Faksa, and it could be any number of guys. There's a lot of guys. He just happens to be a UFA. Probably have a pretty reasonable contract coming his way. He had 15 points this season. He's not a big scorer, but does those things. Wins draws, kills penalties, physical, competitive, kind of some of the things that Gordon mentioned. And it's just, to me, asking Newhook to do that, I think he could be a great penalty killer. I just don't think they can't go into a season banking on that he's going to be able to do that. And I think, like, Josh Anderson transitioned super well to penalty killing after being asked in the offseason to do it. And I'm convinced that one of Newhook or Heineman, or if not both, will probably be asked to do that to replace Armia more than Dvorak.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I was about to say regarding Newhook, that even though you might pencil him as a center on the PK, he would probably act as a winger. I agree. I agree with the argument about finding a veteran guy that would win face-offs and play on your PK. But at the same time, if you go after a guy who for multiple years, then what sort of disservice do you do to your Owen Becks, to your Oliver Kapanens, and if down the road to your Florian Jacquais? I think that if when I was talking about a surgical ad, to me it's looking at someone, whether it be Faksa or somebody else, you're looking at a guy who would be there just for the short term. Eventually, who could give a spot to an Owen Beck. Or the other way to see this is that you could think that your fourth line center would be Jake Evans. Because if by any chance, that's just a scenario here, but Oliver Kapanen right now is showing game after game that he doesn't belong in the AHL. He will play in the NHL.
Yeah.
If he's given quality wingers, if he's the one, let's say, who replaces Dvorak and plays with Anderson and Gallagher next season, and he showed already that he can be defensively responsible, but he participates in that, like high tempo, intense forecheck type of mentality. He can, he doesn't crash and bang, but he can participate in a forecheck type of line. Well, if he develops an offensive acumen that proves it to be more effective than Evans, for example, well, you could have Kapanen eventually, having Kapanen as your third line center and Evans as your fourth. Otherwise, a guy that you sign, let's say, for 1 year and who's really a specialist. I remember back at the trade deadline when we were wondering a few days before the deadline, what if the Canadiens were to add just a little piece to help them down the road? And I mentioned the name Nico Sturm.
Yeah.
To
Who's
me,
available as a free agent right now.
That's it. 30 years old, left-handed shot, big body, certainly not going to cost a ton. He plays 9 or 10 minutes a night. Most of those minutes, well, he can play. He'll do some Fogo, face-off, get-off. He's tremendous at the face-off circle, one of the league's best. He can play on the PK too. For a couple of years in San Jose, he was the forward with the most time on ice on the PK. Doesn't play a whole lot 5-on-5 though, but he can be like a insurance policy, and eventually, if you sign him on a short enough contract, 1 year, ideally, otherwise 2, but ideally 1 year. It's just, and you can integrate a guy like Kapanen on the wing if there's a need, or Beck on the wing, and you're going to need anyway more than 12 guys. So those guys would eventually play center anyway. So to me, when you say, well, we've got to replace Christian Dvorak, I see it as a very minor addition and someone who must not block the way for the young guys to enter the lineup within the next year or two.
With Evans signed for 4 years, the fact that Kapanen and Beck are both right shots is problematic.
Yeah,
it's a reality. Like it's Evans is there, and then so you're going to go Suzuki, 2CX, whoever the 2C is. Better hope he's a lefty. Then Kapanen, Evans. You have 3 right shot centermen. It's not ideal, So that's why it's like Sturm's the lefty. Sturm was the last cut. Like he's the last guy I cut in my little UFA section in my thing. Like I was going to put him in there, but like I think like. I mean, I maybe didn't write it in the piece, but signing Faxo would be predicated on getting him on, say, a 3-year term. Like you mentioned Florian Jacki, right? And this is something I think a lot of people need to realize. Like Florian Jacki is extremely promising, and I think the Canadiens see a future for him in the NHL as a penalty-killing bottom 6 centerman. But to get there, I believe, in all likelihood, he's going to have another year in Laval.
Yeah.
And then he's going to transition to the NHL, probably transition to the NHL at wing. So you're minimum 3 seasons away from Florian Jacki being that guy that you see him being for the long term in Montreal. So if you sign a guy to a 3-year free agent contract and his final year coincides with the year you want Jacki to fully make that transition, that's not the end of the world. It's you can work around that. There's ways. There's things. If Jacki out,
but it's going to take less. It's going to take less time for Kapanen and Beck though to get there.
It will, but they're not lefty. This is the thing. It's like it's a team building thing. The Canadiens are not in a place where you can just indiscriminately add players because they're talented. They have to build a team now, and this is the hard part of any rebuild, and this is the part that most teams wind up failing in. Is yes, you can go accumulate all this stuff, draft picks, prospects, all this stuff. It's not that hard when you're kind of open-endedly just being like, send us your draft picks, and you're like, take our veterans and send us picks. That is not that difficult to execute. It is, and some do it better than most. But as a reminder, one of the guys who did that the best was Marc Bergevin. He was tremendous at selling guys off and getting more value than you thought he would in return. Super good at it. Philip Danault was the result of his ability to navigate that. He got something for Travis. Not only something, you got someone who belongs in the Hall of Fame. You got Sergei Gonchar for Travis Moen somehow. Didn't need any of Moen's money. Like he, time after time after time. And you're like, think back to back then. Like I was like, man, this guy's a genius. Like how the hell is he doing this stuff? Like this is ridiculous. But then when it flips and you have to like surgically, to use your word, which I think is a good word, when you have to surgically pick players and fill specific roles and holes on your team, that party was not good at it all. You know, and he just kind of picked players he liked and hoped they fit in his team. And I think that's the wrong way to go. Like, so that's why I understand blocking Kapanen and Beck, but the person blocking Kapanen and Beck is Evans. And he's already there. He's already the roadblock. Like it's done. Like they've been blocked. That contract blocks them. So, and if they have to play on the wing for a year or two, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. And if they spend another year in Laval or that's fine too. But it's not true to say that, you know, whoever you signed to replace Dvorak is blocking those two guys. The Evans extension blocked those two guys
because of the right-handedness factor.
I know it seems petty or trivial, but it's not. It's ask Marty St. Louis if he thinks it's trivial or not. Like he religiously sends out lefties for left side faceoffs and righties for right side faceoffs. It's a huge factor in how he deploys his forwards. Massive. And so it's important. Not only that, like he'll pick like Dvorak in overtime. Like he does that because the lefty is the strong side in overtime. Like the linesman is on the other side. And so it's like, it's important. And so the Canadiens, to me, they need to add that guy, a guy who can win draws from the left side and play with veteran guys, a physical heavy game, and gives Marty that righty lefty face-off option on the penalty kill. That's a guy I think they need. And they don't have to spend big, and they don't have to go overboard on term. Like
no, but wouldn't it be less of a priority if whoever they find as their second line centerman is a lefty? Then do you absolutely need to have two lefty, two righties as your in your set?
You don't absolutely have to, but I think in an ideal world you would. Sure. Because is that second line center also is he gonna kill penalties and play on the second unit on the power play and play all the minutes at 5-on-5? And like how many things do you want this second line center to do? Like at a certain point it becomes unreasonable. Like we want you to score at 5-on-5. We want you to anchor our second power play unit. We want you to kill penalties. We want you to take these zone draws on the left side. At a certain point, you're asking a lot of of whatever this guy is. Like even Horvat, right? Like even Horvat, who is like our ideal guy for this, like he can do all those things, but asking him to do all those things is a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot, and we can both see the extent to which Suzuki's play improved when his penalty killing load was lessened, right? So you need other guys who can take on those ingrat jobs, like those jobs to free up the offensive guys to do their thing. You need guys like that. And that's what Dvorak did so well. Even when he was taking like heat and the entire fan base seemed to hate him, like that's what he was doing. He was allowing the more offensive guys to do their jobs and not have to do the D zone draws against, and penalty killings. Like he's saving minutes for offensive minutes. He's creating offensive minutes for other guys.
Do you see a world where the Canadiens would have to choose between Beck and Kapanen and move one of the two?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of situations like that. There's Beck and Kapanen. This isn't a situation like that, but they might have to choose between Mailloux and Reinbacher, which I think the choice would be pretty clear there. But they're reaching a point with their prospects. Like there's a tipping point with prospects, right? Like prospects have a shine to them, especially first round prospects or second round prospects that other teams wanted to draft but didn't get to, prospects that have done well. But at a certain point, it tips, right? And that like you look at for instance, look at Mailloux's playoffs right now. He's having a having a great playoffs for Laval, right? And he's really taken some huge strides in his game. Like he's really rounding out his game. Exactly what you want a young, promising defenseman to do at the AHL level.
At this time of the year.
At this time of the year, he's by and large, he's doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so if, let's say he comes to training camp next season, gets cut again, gets sent back to Laval for a third season in the AHL, and let's say he kind of plateaus. Let's say he like kind of has a similar season to this season. Would you be better off trading him now or at the end of next season?
No, of course. You have to. You cannot wait too long and wait for the asset to devalue.
That's
too much. It's otherwise, you know,
and it's just not realistic that the Canadiens.
The Canadiens were lucky to get Alexandre Carrier for period, but for gosh, I already
Justin Barron
for Justin Barron because he was already a depreciated value.
So we thought.
So
turns out not. Yeah, it turns out not in some people's eyes, but yeah. So I think the Canadiens are at that point with some of their guys, even though they haven't reached the NHL yet.
Yeah,
and I don't think they're not at that point with a lot of their guys, but they're gonna start to be at that point very soon. And so yeah, I think that's why this year, this summer, I should say, I think some of these guys are going to be in play. Like it's just like it's nothing against these guys. It's actually a compliment to them that the Canadiens are able to go out and acquire NHL players for them, kind of like Heineman. Heineman got traded for Sam Bennett and Tyler Toffoli. You know, like, and everyone's like, "Oh, he already got traded twice," and it's what a stain on him, you know. And it's not. No, the Panthers went and got a Stanley Cup piece in Bennett. And the Flames went and got a 30-goal scorer that actually was amazing for Calgary and made them competitive or helped make them even more competitive. And so, you know, just because you trade a prospect doesn't mean, and just because if the Canadiens were to do that, doesn't mean they hate the prospect. It's just that they don't, you know, because we're not even talking about Adam Engstrom.
No.
And Adam Engstrom's in that loop. And he's kind of in that sort of puck moving. I know he's a lefty, but you know he can play on the right. He's in that mix where it's becoming. I watch him in Laval, and to me, he doesn't look like he needs another year in Laval necessarily. I think he's verging on being NHL ready, and so it's
even in his own end.
Play.
I don't know. It's he's probably their more dynamic guy. Defensively,
he's a very efficient puck moving defenseman. Yes, he has issues in his own end sometimes, but once the puck's on his stick in his own end, it is quickly on a forward stick in stride, heading towards the offensive zone time after time after time. Much like Reinbacher. I mean, very very similar in that way. Reinbacher's better defensively, obviously, but it's that puck moving ability. Without having blazing feet, but having just great vision and instincts on when to pass the puck, where to pass it, do it without much risk or without much danger. Teams need guys like that. And the longer that team goes into the playoffs, the more these guys, all the guys we've just been talking about, Beck, Kapanen, Engstrom, Mayu, Reinbacher even, the more eyeballs they'll have on them. You know, it really serves the Canadiens' purposes in a developmental sense, but also in a trade sense.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that with a guy like Engstrom, they're gonna take all the time that they have at their disposal to let him develop, figure out what they've got, and they're not going to rush anything. They have the possibility to wait and take their time, let him dominate.
They do. All I'm saying is that the beauty of it for them is they do have that luxury, but if they're in talks for a 2C, let's say, and they reach the point where, okay, we've agreed on you're going to get a first-round pick or both first-round picks or whatever, and this player, and that team needs one more piece, and they're looking and they say, we want that Engstrom kid because of what they've seen.
Yeah.
That is what makes him attractive because yes, he could graduate to the Canadiens and I think he's going to be a really good NHL defenseman and he could have 10, 12, 15 years of playing on defense for the Canadiens and that would be great. Or he could bring in a player that will complete this puzzle in a way that maybe it's not clear how he would do that right now. Obviously there's years ahead of him, but it's Gooley and Hudson should be on the left side of the Canadiens defense for many years. Engstrom, in that context, he's kind of in between those two players in the sense of like, he's got, Gooley's a mobile guy. He can move the puck, but he's obviously a far better defensive player than Hudson is what Hudson is. And in between you got Engstrom. And does that round out your left side the best? That combination of three players, these are all questions the Canadiens have to ask. And it's a fun time, I think, to be management of this team because this is the nitty gritty stuff that that separates great management teams from so-so management teams is when you get to this stage of your build, what kind of decisions do you make? How much forward thinking can you do? And, I think this group's decision to trade Romanov when they did shows that they're not afraid to make these calls. That wasn't an easy call.
So it's interesting that you mentioned Engstrom, being a lefty who plays on the right side, because that's somewhere where I wanted to go in our discussion. The Canadiens will have to replace David Savard one way or another. There are three ways to go about it. They can take one of their young left-handed shots, probably Struble, and move him to the right side. And then since they already have Hudson, who's a left-handed shot playing on the right side, two of those three spots would be taken on the right by lefties. That's a possibility. That's you deal with the fact that you have a surplus of left-handed defensemen and you move one more to the right. That's option A. Option B would be to say, we've assessed David Reinbacher and Logan Mailloux, and we're ready to let them fight for that job between the two of them and give them a spot outright, maybe on our third pairing to start the season, and they would have that job. The third possibility would be to say, either, in the event, for example, let's say Mailloux's traded, or for whatever reason, they consider that both guys, they're just not sure that they can hand them a job next fall.
Oh, so they have a bad camp. Yeah.
That could be that. But do you want to wait until they have a bad camp to make your move? I don't know. So right. then you have to go and look for outside help. And it gets tricky because you need a guy who's going to be a right-handed shot. You'll need a guy who's going to kill penalties, and if he can participate in the added toughness or size element that Gorton referred to, that'd be great.
Well, that the defense group needs. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah,
they need it. When you have Carey and Hudson in your top six, you need to mitigate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So either you look for improving your defense core significantly by going after a guy who could play on your second pairing, maybe, or you just go add a depth piece, similar to what I was telling you in the center with Nico Sturm, but a Nico Sturm for defense, and a guy that you can just plug in there and make sure that eventually you can just toss him away for Reinbacher or a guy like that. But in the meantime, who's going to help you for your current needs? So that's why there's a piece I wrote for Radio-Canada looking at different options there. And, there are some guys who are more like in the second pairing type of profile defensemen, such as Cody Ceci, for example. Yeah. Some people will say that I'm crazy, but I like Rasmus Ristolainen considering all his warts. Yeah. I think that he's got two more years on his contract. It's not too long, and you can continue to work with him. Although he's had surgery, he might not be able to start the season on time. But you can also go for guys that are just 6th or 7th defensemen. Vincent Desharnais had struggled the whole year, going from one organization to the next. But you look at his season in 23-24 in Edmonton, it was quite the coming out party for him. So this is a guy that you can have him start on your third pairing, play some PK minutes, and just finish the last year of his deal. And if at Christmas your kids are ready, well, he becomes your 7th D, or you just move on.
Yeah, I was surprised that you didn't mention Perbix.
Yes, I know. I should have. I know. But to me, it's the thing with Perbix is that it's hard to quantify how much he might get, and because if he
doesn't play on either special teams, and he's not like. It's really honestly like the reason why I struggled, and I decided to put him in, is he's very much he's like what Kulak was when he was in Montreal. Mm-hmm. Like he wasn't a penalty killer, he wasn't a power play guy. Played 14 to 15 minutes at 5-on-5, basically sheltered. So it was hard. But like look at Kulak now. Like he's excelling. He's excelled in Edmonton ever since he's gone. And I see Perbix kind of in that vein, and that. And the thing about Tampa, like you're playing behind McDonough and Hedman, right? And Moser when he's healthy. So there's not there's no upward mobility in that blue line. Like there isn't a whole lot for him to go out and earn. So that's why I put him in, because I feel like this could be a situation where he goes into a scenario where he doesn't have a Hall of Fame defenseman in front of him and another perennial all-star, like a tremendous who might even be a borderline Hall of Famer himself. I doubt it, but anyhow, let's say, but yeah. And what can he do? What can he do when given that opportunity? I don't know, but I think like I liked your list. I didn't think of Marino's. I didn't consider that, but I like Peak as an idea that was interesting. But yeah, it's to me, it's something I think the Canadiens do need to get, but I agree that it needs to be. This is why I didn't put Fabro in, for instance, because I don't think they're going to get Fabro at a short term.
No.
I know. That's the thing. So
yeah, and it's almost like this is where also if you are to sign a guy long term, it better be an improvement and a guy who's going to be after Hudson. Not Hudson, because eventually you could move back Hudson on the left side, but you have to have a clear top 4 defenseman. Otherwise go for short term.
Yeah, but that's why I think Cece's actually a pretty viable guy. Like honestly, like I looked at his minutes in San Jose. Like he played really hard minutes in San Jose, like really hard. And goes to Dallas, you presume that he's going to be a 6th, 7th guy there. No, he's pretty much a top 4 guy there. I mean, it's honestly
but the right side is their problem, and the only
right
problem
side is their
that
problem.
Dallas
And Heiskanen hasn't been there, and Heiskanen often moves over to the right. He plays on the right pretty often, so. But he's done it and was really good. Like in Dallas, like I remember doing it was the 4 Nations. I was doing like a post 4 Nations look at like who's been on the ice for the least amount of goals among defensemen, and it was something on Hudson because he was on that list, but the other guy on that list was Cece. he was on there. Like, and so he gets a lot of flack. Like his analytics are always terrible. They still are, but coach after coach, GM after GM, like this guy keeps living, surviving. Because GMs see value in him and coaches see value on him. They put him on the ice in tough situations. And so I don't know, but I think, I don't know the extent to which he could maybe sign a long-term deal somewhere, but I feel like
there'll be a demand for him. I doubt that he could be had for less than 3 years. And I wouldn't want to sign a defenseman for 3 years. Not when you have Reinbacher, Mailloux, and Engstrom that will,
Engstrom could play on the left, but this is what I'm talking about. It's like the Canadiens need to balance all sorts of windows, but I mean, what you said earlier to start this discussion, like what if they don't want to go into training camp banking on one of Reinbacher or Mailloux making the team or both? Well, long term, can you really bank on Mailloux or Engstrom playing in the NHL and being effective? And can you bank on it? It's likely. It's possible, I'd say. I think the one guy you can bank on is Reinbacher. And then and then they're educated guesses, right? Which pretty much all player projection is. But 3 years of Cody Ceci would not, the one thing Cody Ceci has proven is he's extremely tradable. he's a guy that you can probably move,
that almost goes as well as what's Dwight King's best quality on the ice, and Claude Julien would say he knows when to change.
He knows when to change, exactly. Well, Cody Ceci, teams keep going and getting him. I mean, it's been between signing his free agent, whatever. It's he seems attractive because teams always need a defensively sound right shot D, who's often, to quote the great Jay Leach, who now may be an NHL coach soon, but is a non-factor more often than not, and he's happy to be one. He's basically goes out, does his job, you don't notice him, and that's when Cody Ceci's at his best. And teams have a need for a guy who could play 17, 18 minutes a night doing that.
I think that some of our listeners will pull their hair, though. I saw comments on our chat regarding that Montreal deserved better than Cody Ceci.
Yeah. Well, They will have better than Cody Ceci. They will have David Reinbacher playing in their top four very soon. In the meantime, until he's ready, and I don't think he's ready to play the top four role next year necessarily, having someone who can do it, not perfect, but someone who can just a placeholder, there's value to that. So that you don't force Reinbacher into a top four role before he's ready for it.
But you have to have a guy who's going to play the PK effectively. To me, that's criteria number one. Matheson, who plays full 2 minutes of PKs on occasions, actually more and more towards the end of the season. That was crazy. He will enter the last year of his deal. Otherwise, you have Goulet, and that's about it. So
you have Carrier.
Carrier, but he's more like your fourth defenseman in that scenario. If you can have a guy who would take,
I liked him on the penalty kill,
yeah. But if you can have a guy who would take on Savard's minutes in that sense, I think it'd be important. So we mentioned a few guys who do that. The thing with Perbix, to go back to your guy in Tampa, is that he doesn't play on the PK.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But I think what he does in Tampa is not necessarily an indication of his limits as a player. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. It might just be a situational thing or just a circumstantial thing that you find yourself on this elite team and they don't have room for you on those units. And maybe he can do that. Who knows? He hasn't yet, for sure. And it's possible he can't do that, but it's not a given that he can't. He just hasn't gotten the opportunity. Yeah. Every time I watch him play, I like him. I like him as a player. I think he's a good defenseman. He's very underrated. People don't talk about him a whole lot. He's lost in Tampa because there's so many other big names. I think he's a good player. I personally have thought that every time I watch them.
Yeah. But he's got sheltered minutes, though. It's
big time.
Be a guy,
big time sheltered minutes. But again, that's because when you have Hedman and everything that they have, it'd be silly to put Perbix in high leverage minutes. That just wouldn't make any sense.
So we wanted to let's finish the show talking a bit about the Laval Rocket. They're playing tonight their second game of their series against Rochester. They won the first game on a game winner by Kapanen, and so we wanted to discuss a bit the Rocket on Monday, but we ended up doing this whole second line center special. So watching them go.
It was extravaganza.
It was.
Yes.
What are your? I don't know. What's your main takeaway looking at them, the way that they play?
Well, honestly,
who stands out and
my main takeaway is Kapanen so far.
Yeah.
I was on radio during the playoffs on 98.5, so French radio, and they were kind of losing their minds that Kapanen's even in the lineup. They're like, why don't you bring up Florian Xhekaj? Why don't you bring up this guy? Why don't you bring up that guy? And I'm just like, you have to understand that Oliver Kapanen was a point-a-game center in the Swedish Hockey League this year at his age, at 20. It's almost unheard of in that league for a player his age to do what he did on a team that was competitive. You know, not the best team, but a competitive team. That's a special quality to have. And I remember I talked to him during the playoffs about playing for Olli Jokinen. And I was asking him, like, do you think, does Jokinen want to come here and coach? Like, do you think we'll ever see him in the NHL again? And then I was like, to what extent was your dealings with him, were they more geared towards what they needed from you in Timrå and what they needed from you to win games there? Or were they more geared towards what you needed to do to become an NHL player? And he said, every single thing I talked to Olli Jokinen about was about being an NHL player.
Yeah.
Everything. Every aspect of his game, every detail, every time he dealt with Olli Jokinen, it was to prepare him to excel in the NHL. And so, and that doesn't necessarily jive with what you're doing in the SHL, right? It doesn't necessarily give you the most success in that league, but at least he was lucky enough to have a coach that was able to look past that and say, I'm going to train you to go play in the league where you belong. And he did that. And so when you watch Kapanen play in Laval now, I think you are getting a clear indication of, okay, this guy, what he did in the SHL was no joke. Because you watch him in games now, not that he's too good for the AHL, but he's kind of too good.
He stands out. He stands out.
Like he's pretty good for the AHL, you know? And so I'm happy that he's getting this runway to kind of show Canadiens fans, because the vast majority of them did not watch him play in Timrå. I only watched a handful of his games. They're getting this chance to see, okay, this is why the Canadiens are excited about this guy, because he's doing this at 20. And that's the other thing that stands out, is how many of the young guys are standing out. You know, Farrell continues to be dangerous and produce chances. And obviously we mentioned Reinbacher and Mayu and Engstrom, Fowler, who's starting tonight. You know, I mean, there's like, their whole team are in their early 20s.
Xhekaj is playing against top opposition. He's like their shutdown center.
Yeah.
As an AHL rookie after scoring more than 20 goals.
And after being drafted as an overager.
Yeah. So no. They're in a great setup. And so we
laughed at Nick Bobroff for calling him a unicorn, and we owe him an apology. He might not be a unicorn. That might have been overstating it, but he was right about Florian Xhekaj.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel pretty comfortable saying that even now. Florian Xhekaj is going to play for the Montreal Canadiens. And to do that with a 4th-round pick, an overage kid, a pick that got widely panned by like kind of the outside scouting community, you know, he saw that correctly. He deserves credit for that.
Yeah,
100%.
So it's funny also that in between the pipes, the Rocket managed to win that first game, but in the process, Primo's performance opened the door to turning back to Fowler. There was an interest, you know, there was since the beginning a decision to play both. I don't know if they're going to alternate like systematically, but
I think if you win it, you're in. I think it's going to be a win and you're in system.
Clearly there was a short leash, and Primo, unfortunately for him, didn't do enough to say whatever you think of sending the kid in net.
He won. Yeah,
it's you know, it's not going to happen in game 2 because I'm forcing you to stick with me at least for the time being.
Right, and
he won the game despite that.
Yeah, I know that's true. It's can't be winning you're in because he's not in.
That's it.
Well, because it's so yeah. I mean, it's really like I also think that not only Pascal Vincent, but like I think Pascal Vincent owed it to the team to give Primo that start in game one. Primo's the guy who got them to where they are. Primo's the guy all season, backstopped that team, was one of, if not the best goaltender in the AHL for long stretches of the season. You had to give him an opportunity to claim that net as his own. Mm-hmm. And he didn't do that. And that's not to say that Fowler is necessarily going to do that. Like, by the time people listen to this, maybe this will seem silly, but Fowler in Primo's absence got the job done. And I was at the clinching game of the previous round against who did they play? Cleveland. Yeah, I think you were at that game in a working capacity. I actually bought tickets and brought my son to that game. I was in the stands, and I was in the Rockets net, so that end of the ice for the first and third period, and the puck was at the other end of the ice most of the time in that game. Like, it's Fowler, made the saves when he had to, but that team, that young, prospect-laden team, is playing some really sound hockey, like really, really good. And I know that the first game against Rochester was a bit of a shootout, but still, generally, the structure on that team is really, really impressive. And I think it was good of Ken Hughes to note that at his end of season avail, because it is exceedingly rare to see teams with this many young players have any type of success in the AHL playoffs.
Yeah, and both of their power play units also are very effective. It's hard to argue sometimes to say which one's the clear-cut number one unit. They have a number one unit, but their second one can be just as dangerous. So they're a lot of fun to watch, and I think that we're going to get the chance to see them for quite a while, if only because the AHL schedule in the playoffs is bunkers. There's going to be 5 days off between game 2 and game 3. So we'll have time to go back and talk again about the Rocket, but it's exciting. It's fun to see. All right, everybody. So we'll wrap it up now. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back on Monday.